The 2025 NBA playoffs are just a few weeks away, and as the matchups gradually get set, more so out east than out west right now, I wanted to actually pregame a little bit and share my thoughts, concerns, and joys of a few potential matchups that we are likely to see in the first round. And those matchups are the Detroit Pistons versus the New York Knicks, the Indiana Pacers versus the Milwaukee Bucks, and the potential matchups, plural, the potential matchups that the Los Angeles Clippers could face. All right, so of course, you already know I'm hoping to eventually get Devon and Johnny back to what we can return for a annual NBA playoff preview. Okay, we weren't able to do it last year. I'm hoping that this year we'll be able to. But in the meantime, these are some potential matchups that could make for one of the most interesting first rounds that we've seen in recent memory. So come on with me, get your popcorn ready as we get into a bit of a playoff appetizer right now on H2DG. Welcome to Hip to the Games, the podcast for you, the basketball junkie and the hip hop head. I'm your host Desmond, and I too have had hoop dreams and enjoy the beautiful genre of hip hop and its history. Together, we will enjoy some of the greatest albums, songs, artists, players, moments, teams, and so much more, while even mixing the two on occasion, all in my hope that you remember why you love both or either of these to begin with. You'll soon understand that Hip to the Games is more than just a podcast. It's a lifestyle. And if you were looking for a platform that combines both basketball and hip hop, you've come to the right place. Welcome to this episode of Hip to the Games. Shout out to you if you are a loyal listener and are showing that you are indeed hip to the games by listening or tuning in visually once again. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on YouTube, I sincerely thank you for all your support. And if you do happen to be new to H2DG, if this is your first time watching/listening, welcome. I am happy to have you here. If throughout this episode you do like what you're hearing, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button on whatever platform you're listening to or watching on right now to stay tapped in with all things hip to the games, all right? I know I've been a little bit away from my YouTube channel, just haven't really had the topics or the inspiration to really make some videos, if I'm honest. And especially with the playoffs going in my mind, I think it's kind of setting more towards that and preparing for that and bringing that to this platform. But either way, stay tapped in with all things hip to the game. Stay tapped in with the socials. And you already know the drill, you know. But before we really get into today's episode, you know I got to get my pregame shout-outs out the way. Okay, the first one always goes to the creative director, Jesus Christ, for another H2DG episode, as it's always a blessing to get in front of this microphone and do what he's placed in my heart to do. And the second one goes to my 19 Media Group family for the opportunity to represent the home team. All right, you see that blue and white logo in the corner. That's the home squad. Be sure to follow 19M Group on Twitter, 19 Media Group on Instagram and YouTube to follow everything going on with the network. We have such a variety of shows around sports, music, culture, education, and they're hosted by some passionate, independent podcasters and teammates of mine. And I'm sure you can find another one to support, not just H2DG, but there are plenty of other shows out there like the Baseline NBA. We got Gimmick Infringement, the Wrestling Pod. You know, we got dope interviews with Warren Shaw. We got Hidden Gems Football. You know, I know so a lot going on in the free agency and trades and whatnot. So there are plenty of shows, man, out there that are featured some hosts that are doing their thing, man, and I'm sure you can find another teammate of mine to support, whether that's through likes, comments, reposts, listens, buying merch. Any kind of that support is seen and felt and appreciated. Now, as we get into today's show, all right, if you are a returning listener, you already know how I do, but if you're new to the show, this episode is going to be organized by the format that pays homage to the classic hip-hop song structure. All right, we got three verses for the show today, which represents three topics, and in this case, three playoff matchups for the show. And of course, with hip hop in mind, you know the first verse has to set the tone, the middle one brings the climax or rising action, and then your last verse has to be the haymaker. It has to be the best for last, and it has to bring everything together. And since we always got to start verse one with a bang, I had to start with the potential 3-6 matchup that is between the Detroit Pistons and the New York Knicks. But first, with the NBA action heating up, here's how you can take part of it yourself with H2DG's latest sponsor. The second half of the basketball season is here, and the race to the playoffs is heating up on PrizePicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight for playoff positioning takes place. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. All right, you don't even need a win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed when you use the promo code CLNS. All right, PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts and is available in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. PrizePicks is truly the best way to win real money with all the various opportunities to play and collect your winnings. Due to the enormous selection of players and stat types available, we can mix and match our playing strategies based on personal preferences. For example, I might take my guy Kobe White for more than 25 points because he's been balling lately. But then on the other hand, I might take Jaren Jackson Jr. for less than 5 rebounds. Do you think Luka Doncic will get more than 8 assists next week? Giannis for more than 35 points? Cook up all these kind of hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. And for those who love a quick win, PrizePicks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And remember, with PrizePicks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. And again, that's promo code CLNS to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. You already know H2DG is rocking with PrizePicks, and you should too. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, tipping off today's show with verse 1, I want to start off by discussing Pistons versus Knicks, a potential first-round playoff series that a lot of fans think could go either way. But why is this? Why is the sudden confidence of the Detroit Pistons seemingly trumping the New York Knicks and their star power, right? And I think as much as it's been awesome to see the turnaround of the Detroit Pistons, how is it that we believe in them enough to boot the New York Knicks out the first round? And while we can get into matchups and whatnot, touch on those a little bit, I think it comes down to one key detail: the Knicks' lack of depth. Now remember, I've been preaching this all year. Depth is the new superpower in the NBA. And there's different versions of depth. Now, there's depth that kind of is in the form of the Boston Celtics, right? Where everybody in the rotation can provide reliable offense and defense in some capacity. It may be in the form of the OKC Thunder, where genuinely everybody on that roster loves to play defense. It may be in the form of the Warriors or the Pacers, where we may not be perfect, right? They may not be perfect teams, but we can throw so many different combinations of lineups at you, it can be hard to keep up with from a game plan standpoint. Depth looks different for every team, but no matter what it is, it helps very much in this era of the NBA. And unfortunately, the Knicks don't exactly have that. I think fans and even competitors have peaked, really. The Knicks can't handle, or dare I say, they don't want a dogfight. See, Coach Tom Thibodeau is notorious for his old school rotations, right? They may play 8 or 9 guys, but the thing is, none of those bench guys are really going to play 20 minutes. So they essentially have Brunson, Bridges, and Josh Hart all playing at least 35 minutes. And mind you, one of those guys is probably going to reach 40 for whatever reason. All right, then you got Karl Anthony Towns and OG Anunoby. They'll definitely play 30-something. Won't necessarily be as high as those first 3 guys, but they'll definitely be in the 30s. And then you got Precious Achiuwa and Miles McBride. They're going to be just under 20, right? And even now that you consider that Mitchell Robinson is back from injury, he's going to play about 15, right? He's going to back up Karl Anthony Towns. So that's really it when you think about it. You might get spot minutes from guys like Landry Shamet or Cam Payne, but you really got 8 guys playing, and most of the guys that you'll see out there are going to be the 5 starters. And it shows some games too, like, the Knicks' only depth is really the names that they have. That's what I will say about their depth. It's great because you have Jalen Brunson, you have Mikal Bridges, you have Josh Hart, you have OG Anunoby, you have Karl Anthony Towns. Like, that's only 5 guys, but those guys do so much for the team, right? And that's their version of depth. But again, in this NBA, it's more so about what that second unit can do. How can the role players supplement the starters? And the Knicks don't have that a lot. It's not just Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns doing the scoring. Bridges can get into his mid range. He can close games. He can make clutch shots when he gets them. OG Anunoby, he shows flashes of his scoring ability. He can get hot in the first quarter and they ride his wave. And then you got Josh Hart, who's like this Swiss Army knife, right? He to me, he is the most wild card triple double threat I've ever seen in my life. Meaning that homeboy is 6'5", right? And he just finds a way to get 17 rebounds. And then suddenly he's able to get double-digit assists. Like he's low-key a playmaking threat, or he just plays the game the right way. He's able to get those assists, and his guys are making shots. I just think you would never think of him as a triple-double threat, but time and time again, he shows he can be that kind of guy. And even if you think about the bench pieces, Deuce McBride is really nice off the bench. He can give scoring punches and he can play defense. That's what I love about him. He's a high energy guy. Even in those moments where the Knicks offense gets a little dry, he comes in and he makes a big play and he can really be a spark plug for them. And then, in that regard, with all those guys in mind, the Knicks are very talented. Don't get me wrong, but I think the issue is that Tom Thibodeau relies on that heavily. He relies on his starters heavily. And so if somebody does have an off night, you don't have much to fall back on. Right? For example, OKC, Shea can have 20 to 25 points, but that maybe Isaiah Hartenstein or Lou Dort or Isaiah Joe, you trust that somebody else is going to pick up the slack. I feel like with the Knicks, they don't necessarily have that. And that's where, especially in a playoff environment, a team like that can be exposed, especially in this era of basketball. So enter in the Detroit Pistons, a team that has grit and has depth that shows on offense and defense, mind you. Cade Cunningham has a little bit of that LeBron effect, right? He can score all three levels, loves getting his teammates involved. I love that the leader he's been over the last couple seasons. Malik Beasley, he's the sharpshooter. Tobias Harris is a nice mid-post option. Jalen Duren is the strong inside presence. We went over this in a previous episode, man. Asor Thompson, great defender. Dennis Schroeder, getting him at the trade deadline. Feisty slasher, and he's a guy that likes to guard 94 feet. He's not afraid of anybody. Even the rookie Ron Holland, good energy, good defense, and perfect for this series. Let's be real. Isaiah Stewart, he can stretch the floor. He can knock down threes and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you got to think he's going to tick somebody off, right? You live for those moments. You live for a playoff series in the Garden, right? And you got to know, like, he's going to be an intimidator. He's going to be an irritant. And again, it's these little things that are going to keep the Detroit Pistons in a series like this. Like I said, I went over this before. They are such a dope new version of the old school Pistons teams. They fight, they grit, They do the dirty work, and they're not afraid to win ugly. And the Knicks know all about that. So to basically see a team that's kind of a splitting image in that regard is scary. It's scary. There was a home game that I watched where the Pistons played the Warriors, where they came back from an 18-point deficit 2 different times throughout the game. They did lose the game, but to come back from 18 on 2 separate occasions, I think shows the resilience and just how much they never give up. They are a fighting team. Trust when I tell you. There was another night I tried watching them play on the road versus the Indiana Pacers, and I ended up switching to another game, like, I don't know, around halftime or like the third quarter or something like that. And that inner voice was like, Des, the Pistons are going to come back. Like, you should probably keep watching that game. But I was like, nah, they down 15, 20 points. Like, we know how Indy is. They're just going to run away with it. Like, I'm good. But lo and behold, I ended up checking the score a little later, and the Pistons got that joint within single digits. I think they were down like 5 points or something like that. So, you can never count out the Detroit Pistons, man. You can never count them out. So when I think of a series versus the New York Knicks, get this too. If we're getting into matchups here, everybody in the Detroit Pistons starting lineup, you could say, is at least 6'5". All right. So whether it's Cade or Asor or even Ron Holland off the bench, and you think of that, Jalen Brunson's likely going to have a bigger defender on him. And again, he's a strong guard. He's got great footwork. That doesn't always mean anything to him, right? He's a great competitor, great player. But, especially, again, knowing that a lot of teams switch everything now, he's going to have a big, you're going to want to pick and roll to try to put the weaker defender on him, right? But in this case, it's going to be size with him, right? So I think the Pistons have a little bit more of that versatility to where they can switch everything and be successful versus a guy like Jalen Brunson. Again, when you think if Dennis Schroeder is going to guard him 94 feet, try to tire him out, right? If I'm a defender, that's what I would do. It might just be the Chicago in me, right? But if I think it's always important, especially in a playoff series, if you can get any kind of edge, guard them 94 feet, try to tire them out, bringing up the ball, make them get into their offense at about 16 to 14 seconds as opposed to 19, right? I believe those are little ways you can throw off the Knicks' rhythm. The Pistons, they're not a team to play around with, man. They, like I said, they fight, they scrap. They're hungry. They have options offensively, and in my opinion, would probably prefer a slower paced game. And again, this is what the NBA playoffs are all about, right? This is why I think many of us envision the Detroit Pistons possibly moving on to round 2, and I totally see it. I totally agree. But in defense of the New York Knicks, right, I will say this. You know how I am and how I feel about this come playoff time, all right? The Pistons do not have a Jalen Brunson. Cade is certainly on his way. Don't twist what I'm saying. Cade Cunningham is certainly on his way. I love how unique his game is compared to other guys at his position. He's not always about the flash. He's going to get it done. He's going to get to it. He's going to play with substance. And he recently hit that crazy game winner in Miami, right? He can be the man now. All right. Cade Cunningham is on his way, but I don't think he's on that Jalen Brunson tier of I can make a momentum swinging shot that most guys would miss, right? Jalen Brunson has shown time and time again similar things of what we've seen Carmelo Anthony do. At the end of the day, give me the ball and get out the way, because even if it's ugly, I'm going to figure it out. You can't game plan for a hezzy pull over the contested hand and it just goes in the clutch. You can't game plan for that. Even if you know it's coming, even if you did all your homework, you can't stop that ball from going through the hoop at the end of the day, unless you block it, of course, right? But to me, the Pistons don't have that. I can envision already there are going to be some moments where Jalen Brunson is going to have to just will this team to victory because it's going to be such a hard-fought game. And in those moments, this is what I always say every year, right? This is where the stars show up. Because the role players, they're going to be excellent. They're going to get you through a lot of games. But when it counts the most, you need your stars to be stars. And that's what the New York Knicks have in Jalen Brunson. And even you could say Karl Anthony Towns in his own way. I think that is what is going to push the Knicks over the edge. Even if it's a 6 or 7 game series, even if there's moments where it looks like they're going to lose the series, I believe that is what's going to push them over the edge. You know me by now. Like I said, X's and O's, they're important. Preparation is imperative, but you cannot coach or game plan Kawhi Leonard Game 7 2019 Eastern Conference semifinals, right? You cannot game plan LeBron 2012 Eastern Conference Finals Game 6, 2009 Kobe, 91 Jordan, whoever you want to name. You cannot game plan for a guy that simply wants it more and has put in the offseason work for these very moments to make the shot that you think won't have a chance. Your stars have to hit those big shots. And if the Knicks have that in Brunson, and like I said, if Karl Anthony Towns can stay out of foul trouble, he plays with a chip on his shoulder, you would like to think he has it in him as well. I question how he might fare likely having to deal with Jalen Duren, who is an old school rebounding big. Homeboy is built like David Robinson, okay? That's not going to be an easy matchup for Cat. And I've been saying, the thing about that Cat and Julius Randle trade, that was the very first thing I thought of was this time of the year. Because Cat, his weakness in the playoffs is foul trouble. If he can't stay out of foul trouble, the Knicks are going to have a hard time trying to win this series. So all in all, I do like this matchup. I think it'll definitely be one of the most exciting first round matchups that we get. But we shouldn't act surprised at all if the Detroit Pistons find a way to scrap and get the Knicks out of here early. As crazy as it is to say, that is certainly a chance. The Knicks can certainly win. Don't get me wrong. Obviously they got a battle tested group. They got some great guys over there, but I fear that their season will end very similarly to last season due to the load that their starters will have to carry. And that's something, if I'm Tom Thibodeau, really got to monitor that in the midst of a series where you got to worry about a lot of things. So we'll see how it goes. Now, the Pistons and the Knicks surely look to be one of the more even first-round matchups this year, but how do you see it playing out? Okay, are you with the folks that think the Detroit Pistons can advance, or do you think the Knicks Fab Five-esque lineup will be enough? Be sure to share your thoughts with me down below if you're watching on YouTube, or at me on the socials at Hip to the Games or at Desmond Powell _ to share your thoughts with me, as I'd love to know what you think as well. Verse 1 is definitely off to a hot start, but there's plenty more playoff talk to come as we transition to verse 2. We're staying out east to talk that 4 versus 5 seed potential matchup. But before that, if you like what you're hearing and want to know how you can represent Hip to the Games, show some love, here's how you can do that. As a fan of Hip to the Games, not only should you show your love for the podcast, but you gotta express your love for basketball and hip hop. With a wide variety of clothing and accessories, there is always a way to show how much the game of basketball and the game of rap means to you. Let everybody know what it means to be hip to the games by clicking the link in the episode's description to cop some merch and represent the H2DG lifestyle. Welcome back to Hip to the Games, where I continue with verse 2. Now, as another potential Eastern Conference first round matchup will be the run and gun Indiana Pacers and the Milwaukee Bucks. And the fact that I failed to come up with an adjective for the Milwaukee Bucks should tell you a lot about what I think of this series. So let me start with the Pacers, because I did share much of my thoughts about them last episode. If you didn't catch that episode, though, I shared simply how I struggle to believe that the style that the Indiana Pacers play, I struggle to believe that that can lead to long-term success. But I also acknowledged that if a team like the San Antonio Spurs, a team that I grew up watching, that played differently than any team in the league, had a different dynamic than any team in the league, if they found a way to win championships, in a best-case scenario, why couldn't Indiana do it in this era, right? But as I look ahead to a series versus Milwaukee, I'm actually kind of torn, right? It's a perfect 4 versus 5 matchup, right? Generally in this seeding range, these two teams usually have the same record or a very close record, right? But I'm actually kind of torn. On one hand, I understand that these two teams have had some battles the last couple of seasons, and the Pacers have played the Bucks fairly well. I do think, though, it gets dangerous when they rely on threes too much. I think we saw a little bit of that game. Tyrese Halliburton hit the crazy game winner. But they are very capable of beating this team. I think they have enough ball movement. I think they have great chemistry. I think Pascal Siakam is capable of creating half-court offense when they need it the most. He's not elite in that area, in my opinion, but it's enough for me. He's definitely skilled enough for me to trust him in a playoff series to create half-court offense when they need it. Tyrese Halliburton has certainly found his rhythm the last few months of the season, but it's a lot of threes, layups, or transition buckets with him, I feel like, and I just question what he's going to bring in those big moments, right? Like I said, I think when you think of the Eastern Conference guards, Jalen Brunson, Damian Lillard, Cade Cunningham, Donovan Mitchell, these are other East guards who I know have real hoop game. And this is no diss to Tyrese Halliburton, but I'm kind of challenging him, like, show me something. Like, I know that if I was a defender and I could take away one or even two options of those guys, they still got something in their back pocket to rely on, whether that's mid-range game, post-up game, float game, pivots, step-throughs, drifters even, drawing fouls, just something else to go to. But a key thing to remember, too, in this series is that the Pacers have a really good bench. And in fact, in the game where Tyrese hit that crazy 4-point play to win the game, the Pacers bench had a better plus-minus than the starters, if I'm correct. And I know plus-minus is such a controversial stat because it can be circumstantial, right? It doesn't always reflect a player's impact on a game, right? You could come in garbage time and suddenly be plus 18 just because you were out there. You know what I mean? I understand that. But in back and forth games like that one, it makes sense. It can make sense. The bench essentially kept them in the game to the point where it could be winnable. That's something to pay attention to as well, I think. And again, the Pacers, they're one of those teams where their depth will certainly show in what could be a tight series here. It may not be enough for Boston or Cleveland, let's say, but definitely that bench is one of their strong points. Now, that said, the thing is, these two teams, their last meeting was on March 15th, and that bench didn't play as well as they did that other game. And the Bucks walked away with a win. And I think a win that actually would have been even bigger if Aaron Nesmith didn't go off for 30, right? And no diss to Aaron Nesmith at all. I think it's been great to see him finally find a home in Indy after riding the bench in Boston. But the Bucks are lucky that wasn't a loss, because the Pacers cannot continue to rely on the hot hands of role players to get them to the finish line, right? It's cute in the regular season. It makes for great stories, when guys like Nembhard and Neesmith and Obi Toppin drop 30. But in the playoffs, if that's going to be your bread and butter, if that's what you're going to rely on, that's dangerous. That's what I need Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam to be doing. They need to be the ones dropping 30. And on top of that, defense wins championships, and that hasn't really been a strong suit for the Indiana Pacers. So while the Pacers definitely have the tools to be one of the most unique, to have one of the most unique playoff runs in recent memory, I think all of that is exactly why I think it's imperative that the Milwaukee Bucks act like they have a superstar duo and make this team pay. Because the Pacers are going to try to prove that last season's deep run wasn't a fluke. Now, before I get into my call to action with the Milwaukee Bucks, let me discuss why they might run into some problems with the Pacers. Now, a big thing I take into consideration is that the Bucks are right underneath the Denver Nuggets as the team that takes the second highest percentage of post-ups in the league. And the unique thing about this is that it's not like Denver having Nikola Jokic, right? It's not like Houston having Sengun or even Indiana having Siakam. It's the fact that Giannis, Brook Lopez, and Bobby Portis all get a nice share of post-ups throughout a game. And when you have three players like that in an era of basketball that doesn't prefer to slow the game down, it can be trouble because rarely will these players see one-on-one matchups, right? Indy's defense will likely roam, stunt, and even double the post player in the effort to get the ball out his hands and force them to go away from their preference. Y'all run something else. We know y'all like them post-ups. Try something else, right? And we've seen this before. That can easily cut time off the shot clock for Milwaukee and force Giannis to take a shot that he doesn't want to take. Probably is thinking one dribble pull up that he didn't want to, that he's got to rush for the shot clock, or a fadeaway that is probably going to be too strong because that's just not his game, right? Or Damian Lillard trying to make something happen instinctively when, as talented as he is, you don't always want to do that, right? And while I'm the first person in line to encourage patient basketball, and I love the value of the mid-post game, at least in this particular series, I would actually like to see Doc Rivers and the Bucks place more of an emphasis on Damian Lillard operating out the pick and roll. And the reason why I say that is this. If you were paying attention, you peeped how recently Damian Lillard expressed in a post-game interview, essentially saying how it can be hard to balance wanting to go off and play his game and do what they brought him here to do versus playing the game the right way and staying within the coach's offense and system, right? And if the Bucks get knocked out the first round by the Indiana Pacers, I hope everybody remembers this, because this is exactly what Doc Rivers has struggled with as he has coached superstar duos in this league, okay? Please take a note of what Damian Lillard said.
It can be tough sometimes because obviously they're switching because they want to take you out of your actions, and you don't want to fall into just playing one-on-one all night. But for me personally, sometimes, they switch, and every time I feel like I can get in the paint and, get some type of reaction from the defense, draw some help. But, then we're saying we want to move the ball. We got to have some action. So it can be a tough balance sometimes, especially when a team builds a lead and you don't want to go out there and try to take it upon yourself. You want to use that time to continue to trust. That's what the best teams do. So it's a tough balance where in your mind you're like, all right, I might have to dominate and try to take over this 4 or 5 minute stretch. And then you don't want to go against, what the team is kind of preaching. Like we got to move the ball. We got to play for each other. You still have that mentality, but, as a great player, you want to go and get things done. So it's definitely a tough balance.
Please make note of that, because Doc Rivers hasn't always done well with this. I think back to 2020, right? Everybody clowned Paul George because he commented on Doc Rivers saying like, oh, he didn't really set me up for success, paraphrasing. But he was absolutely correct. If you watched and studied that series, he had PG coming off screens like Ray Allen. And for PG, that's more of a tertiary option, right? It's nice to sprinkle in off-ball screens. But Doc was essentially making that the bread and butter of their offense and how to get PG open looks. And the only way he and Kawhi got in rhythm together was when they said, bump your playbook, let's hoop. Now, I thought he did a solid job with James Harden and Joel Embiid. That's a little bit of an easier dynamic to manage as it's guard versus big man. But then even now, you would think he would translate that to Dame and Giannis, right? But I think he's back on his bull, if I'm being honest. Like, when they acquired Damian Lillard, I think the Bucks knew what time it was. I think we all knew what time it was. This two-headed monster is going to take us as far as we can go. We're going to get back to the finals because we got Damian Lillard. But under Doc Rivers, I don't think Doc Rivers has prioritized that the way he should have. See, I think on paper, the Bucks have what it takes. I genuinely believe that they have what it takes to make a deep playoff run. Giannis and Dame should be taking turns getting theirs every trip down. Taurean Prince, Gary Trent, AJ Green, these guys are going to knock down shots off the pressure they draw. Kyle Kuzma, he's going to be able to operate off their pressure. Bobby Portis as well. Brook Lopez can stretch the floor as well, right? I think the priority should be to let Giannis and Dame ball out and sprinkle in the other guys when need be. Because, see, a team like Boston, they don't have to do this, right? They don't have to do this with Tatum and Brown because they're so deep. But the Bucks, they have to pull a LeBron and Kyrie. They have to pull a LeBron and AD, so to speak, because they have two guys that are capable of doing the heavy lifting. Isn't that what this trade was for? Let's put these two alphas together and get another banner. So to not play like that, I think it's only causing a disservice, not only just now, but can potentially be a disservice in the offseason. And say Giannis comes out of nowhere and entertains the idea of taking his talents elsewhere if the Bucks don't truly maximize the acquisition of Damian Lillard, while he and Giannis are still all NBA-esque talents. So to me, as it circles back to Dame's comments, they're pretty alarming to me because it's like, oh shoot, I've seen this movie before with Doc Rivers. And one thing about Doc Rivers, I respect him because that brother is going to keep a job. But the thing is, he has not shown to make adjustments until it's way too late. And I fear that if the Bucks' backs are against the wall, that's when Dame and that's when Giannis are going to try to go crazy. And you're going to be like, oh, well, they should have been doing this from the jump. Well, it's like what Dame said, right? I balance trying to get mine, but also stay within the offense. The coaches want me to stay inside the offense, but if we being honest, me going to work is going to help us win games. So that's my mind when it comes to this, so I'm rooting for Milwaukee to figure it out. I'm rooting more so for Dame and Giannis to figure their dynamic out for playoff basketball because I think it can be an absolute it can be legendary if they want it to be. But I also understand that they've had a lot of flaws with their offense, and again, all eyes are going to be on Doc Rivers because we've seen this movie before. I think it's definitely not crazy though to think that a Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard team can get booted out the first round. So, I'm definitely watching Indy versus Milwaukee for that reason. The 4 versus 5 matchups are always primed to be close battles, and boy, does this one between the Bucks and Pacers look like it could be close. But which team are you more confident in to get out the first round? Is it Indy? Is it Milwaukee? Whose shortcomings are going to play a bigger factor in their success or lack thereof? Post your thoughts in the comments on whatever platform you're on, and feel free to hit me up on the socials. But in the meantime, I got one more verse regarding a potential playoff matchup. This time going West Coast to touch on the different scenarios the Los Angeles Clippers may find themselves in. But before that, with the NBA playoffs close, you're going to want to make sure you got all eyes on the action. Here's how you can ensure that you don't miss any of the playoff battles. If you're hip to the games, that means you yearn for nonstop NBA action. And thankfully, NBA League Pass serves as your ticket to the ultimate basketball experience. Enjoy live games, on-demand replays, and exclusive behind-the-scenes content across a variety of devices just at the tap of a finger. With NBA League Pass, you'll get more games, and that's regular season and playoffs, more features, including multi-view angles, in-depth stats, and behind-the-scenes stories, and more access, of course. Catch your favorite teams and players anytime, anywhere. League Pass is for fans like us who live the game. Sign up now at NBA.com/LP19MG. That's NBA.com/LP19MG. HUDG is working in affiliation with NBA League Pass and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing the link provided. All right, for the third and final verse of today's episode, I ideally wanted to talk about the Clippers' potential playoff outlook for the first round, but being that they are in the play-in convo at the time of this recording, there are a lot of scenarios that they could find themselves in. For example, if they indeed lock up the 7th seed, at the time of this recording, they're likely to face the Houston Rockets. However, if they lose the first play-in game but win the second, they would be the 8th seed and face off against the OKC Thunder. But even with that in mind, there is potentially a lane for them to snatch the 6th seed from Golden State and potentially face either the Lakers, Nuggets, or even the Grizzlies. Now, those are a lot of scenarios, and I don't want to even give you a headache dealing with a bunch of what ifs, right? So let's roll with what I feel are the two most realistic scenarios for the Los Angeles Clippers. And I think that's number one, either staying put at number 7 and facing Houston, or switching spots with the Warriors and potentially facing the Lakers or the Nuggets. I think that's cool and will distract you from the fact that I believe a healthy Clippers team could beat OKC in a first round series. But we won't get into that. So yeah, I already know it's not the first and last time I say something that's going to raise eyebrows on this podcast, I'm sure. But flowing with the episode here, we're going to act like that didn't happen. Let's presume that the West standings for the most part are set, and the Clippers find themselves facing the Rockets in round 1. Once again, a matchup that would be very entertaining and I think very, very interesting. I voiced my admiration for the Clippers a couple episodes ago, pointing out how everyone seems to be bought in to their roles and how that has attributed to their success, unlike some of the teams they've had in the recent years. Kawhi's back. He's looking really good as of late. Harden continues to impress. Zubac has been awesome. Bogdanović, I think, has found a rhythm at the perfect time after a kind of down season. Everybody's fitting well. But in terms of a matchup with the Rockets, both of these teams have weapons. I think the Clippers have greater star power in Kawhi and Harden as opposed to the Rockets having Sengun and Jalen Green. But both teams are deep and pretty much have everything in some form or fashion, right? Defense, rebounding, shooting, secondary scores, X factors, if you will. And as great of a job as Ime Udoka has done with the Rockets, it's just this one thing that I've questioned all year is whether or not they'll be ready for this stage. And I mean, sure, Ime, he can give them all the game in the world, right? But at the end of the day, he cannot make up for their lack of playoff experience on the floor. And that's just the thing that scares me a bit. Inexperienced teams usually have to learn their lesson first, right? Again, it's the same thing. If you even look back to when I was talking about the Detroit Pistons, as much as a lot of us think they can beat the Knicks, inexperienced teams tend to take their L first, right? Their learning experience. Even if they do take a team to 6 or 7 games, inexperienced teams usually have to, let's say, lose to Lil Tick before they eventually defeat Papa Doc, right? If you get the 8 Mile reference. And I think, get this, and the reason why I bring that up, I feel like I think a lot of people my age and in this generation like to go do away with the experience thing. Like, it's a young, and I get it, right? It's a young man's league now, pretty much. It's no longer a man's league. It's really a young man's league now. And so inexperience can actually work in your favor. But I just, again, as an old soul, I just can't help but see the value in that, right? So get this. The only players on the Houston Rockets who have played in a playoff series are Dillon Brooks, Aaron Holiday, Jock Landale, Fred VanVleet, Steven Adams, and Jeff Green. That's 6 players. All right, solid mix, don't get me wrong. But for the Clippers, when you compare that to the Clippers, almost every single player on the roster has played in the playoffs before. Literally, everybody except for Jordan Miller and their rookie/two-way guys. Those guys haven't been in playoff series. But everybody else has at least played like 3 minutes in a playoff series. At least been in a playoff environment in some form or fashion. And I think, again, that can be a big difference in a series like this. Now, sticking with Houston, do I doubt guys like Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, and Tari Eason's abilities to perform in the playoffs? No, not at all. I think Sengun has a skill set that will work just fine in a playoff environment. I think his matchup with Ivica Zubac might be, the matchup to watch in a potential series. I think Amen Thompson can provide energy attacking downhill, similar to how Russell Westbrook was able to versus the Lakers in his first appearance in 2010. And I think, guys like Kawhi, James Harden, Norman Powell, they're going to have their hands full running into potential matchups in Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, and Dillon Brooks. That's tough. That's going to make you lose some hours of sleep. I do think Jalen Green has matured a lot offensively. Obviously, since January, he's really had that I've arrived kind of swag and bounce in his step that many scorers develop their first few years in the league. But his shot selection has never been the best. And I'm anxious to see his decision making in a playoff environment. Like I said, when the game slows down, when you're game planned for, right? When guys are going to be able to lock in on you and you only for at least 4 games, but they do have some battle tested dudes, man. Like I said, Fred VanVleet is a champion. That dude, he's gritty. Steven Adams, a lot of battles in OKC. Dylan Brooks, he's a part of those rising Memphis teams, right? So he knows this is his home right here, and even Jeff Green, he's literally seen it all. OKC, Boston, Memphis, the Clippers, 2018 Cavs, 2020 Houston Rockets, Brooklyn, and then eventually winning a championship with Denver in 2023. He's really seen it all. He's been the youngin', he's been the role player, he's been the starter. He's got the first round exits. He's seen the semifinals exits. He's been to the conference finals, and he's been to the NBA finals and even won an NBA finals. So he's a great vet to have with this group because he's literally seen every single stage of the NBA playoffs with every kind of role. And, a lot of those guys are going to add value and necessary wisdom and experience. And in terms of depth, kind of being an underlying theme in today's episode, I feel like Houston's depth shows the most in their defense, while the Clippers' depth, I think, shows more in terms of their defense and or shooting. But here's something to consider. The Rockets are 3-0 versus the Clippers this season. The first matchup, they won by 8, as nobody on the Clippers scored over 20. All right, while the Rockets had nearly 6 players score at least 15. And then the second matchup was the NBA Cup group stage game where Houston won by 21. Jabari Smith had a game-high 28, and Sengun and Fred VanVleet they nearly both had triple-doubles. Fred was a few assists shy, but Sengun got his. And then the third game, the Rockets won by 11. Jalen Green led all scorers with 31, and James Harden did not play. And even with those facts stated, there were a few trends that I noticed. Number one, Kawhi Leonard was not available for any of those games. Number two, Ivica Zubac was held to single digits every game except the third, where he finally woke up with a 21.12 rebound performance. And number three, Norman Powell was held to under 20 points each game. So while each of these games showcased the Rockets' underrated scoring depth, right? I think with guys like Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, and even Aaron Holiday chipping in with a handful of points to help them win games, all 3 of their regular season meetings were before the return of Kawhi Leonard, and the moves they made at the trade deadline, getting a guy like Bogdan Bogdanovic, a veteran like Patty Mills, and filling out their much needed center depth with Drew Eubanks and even Ben Simmons. So all eyes point to their final matchup, which will be on April 9th. Again, perfect timing, just a few days before the playoffs, or I should say maybe about a week before the playoffs actually start. And which, of course, would be a potential playoff series against each other. Look, man, the Rockets are scary because they ain't scared of nobody, right? And they lock up. But the Clippers definitely filled some holes that they had, like I said, addressing their center depth and getting another scorer, another streaky guy, another competitor in Bogdan Bogdanovic. And even in low-key, even Ben Simmons, to me, he kind of aids their already great defense and can push the ball in transition. And that's the thing. One thing about the Clippers is that they know how to get in the passing lanes, right? They've been one of the best defenses all year. And a part of that is because they know how to get in the passing lanes. So if the Rockets can't protect that pill, they'll be in trouble because the Clippers are going to turn those into points. And one thing about having Kawhi Leonard is that this dude ain't afraid of a double team. He ain't afraid of any kind of help defense if defenses like to show, you know what I mean? If they like to stunt when he gets the ball in the post, like he's not afraid of that stuff. Like, even if you look at his game winner versus the Kings, like, the defense collapsed, and essentially he was surrounded by, like, 4, really the whole team, and he still got that lefty hook off at the buzzer. Like, Kawhi Leonard stays composed. He came up in an NBA that was still tough, and the paint was packed. He's used to this. And so, if I'm the Clippers, I'm leaning on, obviously, for obvious reasons, you lean on Kawhi Leonard as a bright spot, a major bright spot. But again, I think they can match the Houston Rockets' defensive intensity. Now, it's funny, too. The Clippers prefer to play fast, I think, but Kawhi Leonard single-handedly gives them the ability to remain composed when the game slows down because, like I said, this is when he gets in his mid-range game. I'm not sure if the Rockets have that kind of luxury, but make no mistake, they know how to put points on the board, too. And very similarly to the Clippers, have guys that are capable of getting hot if you sleep on them. And one thing about the Clippers, when that offense gets cold, it gets real ugly for them, right? Like I said, in a series like this, Norman Powell has got to give me more than 20. Zubac got to at least give me 15. Harden's got to be on point. Kawhi's got to be on point. And some buckets from Bogdanovich off the bench is going to be very helpful, right? But everybody's got to be dialed in. It can't be no 13 points from Norman Powell. It can't be no 8 points from Ivica Zubac. Like, if the Clippers are going to win this series, they got to be on point. They got to be on point. And like I said, I fear that when their offense gets cold, that's when it gets ugly. We've seen that the last few seasons. If Houston can force the Clippers to generate tough offensive looks, this series, I think, will certainly go in their favor. So this should also, I think, be a very close series. I think the Clippers can win in 6 or 7, but the Rockets are capable of doing that as well. I personally will roll with the Clippers. I'm rooting for the Clippers, I won't lie, because of their playoff experience and the fact that the Rockets will be facing a different version of them. But it ain't going to be an easy feat at all for the Clippers. But see, now, what if it's not Houston, right? What if it's the Denver Nuggets? What if we get a battle of LA and they face the Lakers? Well, to keep this part a little bit more brief, I think the Clippers would have a harder time versus the Lakers than the Nuggets. And I might even be tripping saying that, but at least my thought process, having to deal with Luka Doncic and LeBron James for a playoff series sounds stressful. And again, the Lakers are a bit of a bigger team in that regard, and I think that showed in their regular season meetings. But interestingly enough, though, the recent 2 games at Crypto Arena were without Norman Powell for the most part, and the Clippers only lost by 4 and 6 points respectively. But that said, it was literally the same for Austin Rivers on the Lakers side. They still won without him for the most part. As again, both he and Norman Powell coincidentally just played 9 minutes in those 2 games combined, right? So it's strange. It's strange. I think it seems like if they can force LeBron and Luka to do it all, they have a chance. That's what I have noticed about the Lakers. You'll check the box score some games and you'll see that, Luka's got 28, 10 and 7, and LeBron's got 25, 9 and 9, but it's like they might be the only 2 dudes in double figures. You know what I mean? And you're like, this is why the game is still close. You know what I'm saying? This is why even as at the time of this recording, the Bulls just beat the Lakers last night, and LeBron and Luka had some nice games, but it's like at some point you were kind of like, that's it, really. So again, if you're thinking of a playoff atmosphere, it's like, we're just going to force them to do it themselves. It's kind of like what Phil Jackson always said, I'll take one guy beating me. One man is not going to beat 5. And in this case, 2 men are not necessarily going to beat 5, right? So I think the Clippers have a chance because they can live with that. But at the same time, the Lakers, they got a lot of wings and they can guard, they're going to be bigger defenders on like a Norman Powell, on a James Harden, on a Kawhi Leonard. So I kind of worry about that, but of course, and that's the thing with the Lakers too, if they get hot, it's hard to contain. And for me personally, it's just hard for me to count out Luka and LeBron on the same team. I think the Lakers could potentially win a series versus the Clippers in 6, because that defense would be a little bit harder for the Clippers to score on. I could even go as far as saying that the winning team would honestly be dependent on the success or failure of Austin Reeves and Norman Powell as a third option, right? So if Austin Reeves is balling, I think the Lakers have a shot, but equally if Norman Powell is the one that's balling, I think the Clippers have a shot. I think those guys would really be the X factors in a potential playoff series. It'd definitely be a fun matchup, but I'm having trouble seeing the Clippers for some reason. As much as I believe in them, I'm having trouble seeing them overcome a healthy Lakers team. But even though the Lakers, they're not perfect either. So it's interesting. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. Now, as for Denver, I like the Clippers' chances. I would say Clippers in 6. Funny enough, though, the Clippers have went 1-2 versus the Nuggets. Both losses, they got 20-pieced. And even lost a game where Jokic didn't even play. And the only win that they got came to thanks to nearly a 40-point triple-double from James Harden. So maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I should be saying Nuggets in 6 or even 5 at that point, right? But again, Like I said, I've been through this before, man. I know what it's like to see your team go crazy in the regular season and then get figured out come playoff time. And again, these were all games without Kawhi Leonard. These were all games before the trade deadline. So the Clippers are going to be a very different team. And I just feel like the Nuggets, man, they be tripping sometimes, man. Like, no matter what kind of game Jokic has, they'll win like 3 straight, but then they'll lose to a team that they should have beat, right? Or then they'll win one, but then that next game, it's like, oh, they had the lead, but then they lost it in the fourth quarter. Like, as beautiful as their basketball is, they can be real confusing at times. And let's be real, their basketball looks noticeably different when Jokic sits, and even more different when Aaron Gordon or Jamal Murray are struggling, right? Like, don't get me wrong, the Nuggets are cold, man, and Jokic, he's that dude, and I love, and me personally, I love the lineups where Russell Westbrook and Jokic play together. I feel like the Nuggets get a little extra bounce in their step when those two guys are on the floor. But like I said, man, I just believe in the Clippers. They play my kind of basketball. They do it in a way that is healthy. You can still play fast. You can still get a lot of shots up, but you can still be a little bit methodical. You can still be a little patient. You can still, make sure you're getting good looks and playing defense and getting your hands dirty and getting grimy, right? I just believe they have everything, them and OKC. And technically the Lakers, because Luka and LeBron do so much in just the form of 2 players. But again, that's why I said what I said in the beginning about OKC, low-key, because, I don't see OKC losing a series unless it's a team like the healthy Clippers or even the Lakers. And I said it before, the Thunder have the best group of role players in the league. But I fear that so much is going to fall on Shea, these other teams might be able to take advantage. Because Shea is going to get his 30 points. We know that. Book it. But what do you do when Lou Dort decides to drop 25? Or Hartenstein goes for 20, or even Alex Caruso isn't, and no diss, but isn't an offensive threat in the slightest, but he gets 15 and he misses 1 shot. Like, Chet Holmgren being healthy and being able to stretch the floor for them brings a whole different dynamic. J-Dub is an all-star. It's a lot to deal with. That's why the Thunder are so dangerous. But if teams can contain those role guys and force Shea to do it himself, that's better than watching 7 dudes score in double digits. Right? And there's even other guys, Aaron Wiggins, he be coming out of nowhere doing his thing. Isaiah Joe can get hot. Like, the Thunder are crazy. And man, their defense is just so tough, man. So tough. That, like I said, OKC, like I said, that was my pregame pick, to come out the West. But I like the Clippers with a healthy Kawhi Leonard and a couple of those acquisitions they got post trade deadline. I'm kind of stressing right now, don't mind me, because some of this stuff I'm still like not even fully convicted of, right? But case in point, don't sleep on the Clippers no matter the situation. That's all I'm really saying. They're not a perfect basketball team, but they do a lot of things. Like, when they're rolling, they look like one of the best teams in the league. And I'm just going to say that outright, like I said, if I'm OKC, if I have to see if there's in some crazy world where the Clippers get the 8th seed, that's not a series you can just like that's going to be one of those semifinal-esque, dare I say, conference finals-esque first round matchups. Like, you got to have your hard hat and lunch pail ready, because that's not going to be an easy one out the gate. Like I said, the Clippers, though, they have their flaws, but at their best, and I believe at their healthiest, they are indeed dangerous, and that's why I have a lot of faith in them. So those are my admittedly all over the place thoughts surrounding the playoff scenarios for the Clippers that they could find themselves in. But what do you think? All right, was I tripping? Am I talking crazy? Even though I don't care if that's what you think, but let me know if there's a different way I could think about it. Are they a sleeper contender now that Kawhi is back, or are you scared that things aren't going to work out? Are the OKC Thunder just that good, or are the Denver Nuggets, going to show that they can be a championship contender? Are the Lakers going to, get in full gear? Like, talk to me. Let me know everything. You know the drill. All right, hit me up on the socials, comment on YouTube, tag me with your thoughts. Let me know so I can see what you're thinking as well. But with that final verse, we have made it to the end of another Hip to the Games episode. From the Pistons vs. Knicks series to the Pacers vs. Bucks and the Clippers. Vast array of scenarios. There are already just a few potentially really entertaining playoff series on the horizon. But as always, these were just my thoughts. So now I got to hear from you. All right, you can tweet the show at Hip to the Games or tag me directly on Twitter and IG at DesmondPowell_ and share your thoughts on any of the topics discussed today, as I would love to hear or read your thoughts. And I simply want to say thank you for listening to another episode of H2DG, all for the love of the best combo there is. And of course, here's a huge shout out to you for not only being hip to the games, but also coming here every other Friday and handling my madness. All right, peace out and God bless. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Hip to the Games, and if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit up the socials at DesmondPowell_ and at Hip to the Games on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok so you don't miss out on the fun. And please follow or subscribe to the show and leave a review on the podcast platform you're on right now, as your support is greatly appreciated.